that should be dealt with. It is a challenging, ongoing issue. And the plan also identifies resources needed to improve how we manage the preserve. And that will be a city council and city department budget discussion on where can we get these additional resources. It's going to be an ongoing issue. So I think our feeling is that the plan does address the Himalayan blackberry issue and has recommendations on how to deal with it. Willows are a native species, so they're part of the Laguna environment. Yeah, when plants are mixed together, sometimes it is more difficult to deal with them. But I guess that's what I would say. I don't know if Joan, you have anything to add?
So you're talking about just the logistical difficulty of removing blackberries when you have a thicket?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a lot.
Can you just wait a second? Can we have you come to the microphone if you would, just so this is recorded for the camera? And I don't know, you might want to join her. Thank you.
There are a lot of areas where there is a thicket that combined blackberries and willows. And, some people have advocated like opening that up, but we really don't want to get rid of willows. But how do you manage willows combined with blackberries so that you maintain the willows that you want, but you don't have a thicket? And I bet it costs money.
Right, well, it's, we're recommending primarily working by hand. So it is possible to work around existing native vegetation, and we're recommending, to the extent we can, to work around native vegetation as you're removing the non-natives, like the Himalayan blackberry. And, often there's some really big swaths that are just pure Himalayan blackberry that that wouldn't really be an issue, where, it'd be a good place to start is just solid blackberry. It's not so much of a tangle, so there's plenty of places to start. It's going to be, a long time, if ever, before the city eradicates Himalayan blackberry from the preserve. So I think handwork to protect native vegetation where it's intermingled is the way to go.
Okay, and so over time, our goal is going to be to get rid of those blackberry thickets, but it's going to take time to get there.
Yeah, honestly, I don't foresee that the city will necessarily ever eradicate it. It's going to be constantly brought in again from adjoining properties by birds and water.
Right.
So it's, as long as it's in the area, it's going to be coming back in. So it's more a question of managing it, and we've selected locations where we consider high priority for restoration.
Right.
And it's really crucial to remember that we're not talking about just removing the blackberry. We're talking about replacing it with a suite of native species of different types that can help fill those niches that will grow rapidly, because otherwise, we don't think it would be successful.
Yeah, okay. Then I have another question, and that's about the formation of the Laguna Channel, and if you could explain to me, so the channel banks are rather steep, and is that a natural phenomenon, or is that because the water, when it's going rapidly, carves out a deeper channel over time, and then it fills up in the wintertime and then leaves steep banks in the summertime? Is that how that works? Or is that?
Do you want to talk about it, or shall I?
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so yeah, we did talk about this last time. My understanding is that through most of the preserve, the channel banks have been straightened and steepened over the course of Strathfield's history. And that has, a variety variety of effects. There are some good effects to that. One, I mean, partly it was done to protect, adjacent land and structures, right? So the development along Morris Street, for instance, wouldn't be there if it hadn't, fill hadn't been placed and the channel straightened. But from an ecological perspective, there is actually one benefit, which was that I think that steeper-sided, deeper channel helps keep Ludwigia at bay. Patty has mentioned, she works all around the Laguna, and the preserve is somewhat unusual for not being inundated with Ludwigia. And that may be part of the reason, that plus the good canopy, which is also pretty unique in the preserve, that we have a really nice canopy in many places of the preserve, of valley oaks as well as the willows, shading the channel. And that also helps reduce the Ludwigia, and that's also not present north and south. So those channel changes, yes, they were human mediated, and they have pros and cons.
And then the one other question, which isn't for you guys, it's for staff, who's sitting over there, maybe a staff person.
Well done.
Well done. Is it the case that it would be very difficult for us to get permission from Caltrans to have a trail that goes underneath the bridge?
That is an action that's recommended by the plan. So that's certainly something that the Regional Parks Department, the Laguna Foundation, and the city have all expressed support for that concept. I think all those entities would try to work together after the bridge is finished to see what we can do. Caltrans was lobbied to create that kind of undercrossing in conjunction with the new bridge. They said no, but if you guys want to do it, we'll work with you. So that is called for in this plan to try to accomplish that.
And then perhaps there will be strength in numbers where we can make that happen.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think that's gonna happen, and I think people are just gonna go under there, because we'll all be curious, and here we are. I mean, Tomodachi has given us access, so we'll walk ourselves there, and then it will be created, and then we'll probably have an easier time dealing with it. I have one question for staff as well. I'm just curious, assuming there is adoption of this plan, what would be the council's next steps? I mean, so we would have a plan, and then ultimately we want to have it happen on the ground. But what do we do? Is there an RFP in there, or do we, how do we do that?
One, we are awaiting word on a grant application that's already been filed for nearly $500,000, and we're hoping for word on that soon. And there are other grant opportunities, even if we're not successful with that one. There's a couple other opportunities that are out there that this project would seem to be a competitive, a good fit for certain grant programs. So we may be coming back to the council with authorization to apply for additional grants, or good news on that pending grant application. Another important step, if this is adopted, is for initially city departments to look at the adopted plan and its recommendations for additional maintenance resources or other actions that typically wouldn't qualify for grant funding and should be considered for possible city funding. And initially for departments to look at that in the upcoming budget process and bring some recommendations to council about that. And then there are also more practice type items as far as particularly for public works and the police department, that the protocols, not necessarily involving more expense, that also the city department should review and consider how they've been doing certain maintenance or patrol activities. So those are some of the actions. Looking for outside resources is a big one in terms of capital improvements and additional restoration.
If I could as well.
Thank you, yeah, I think this is good to know.
Just reading from the planning director's staff report from when this came before the council previously, he basically concludes the staff will review the plan, make funding proposals in the fiscal year 2016-17 budget process. So that's going to be the catch-all here, that this will be looked at by the budget committee, by staff, department heads, and then by the budget committee during the budget process.
Which is all about the money. In some ways, this is all about the work. And I'm thinking about work that may be done without all that money. For instance, volunteer effort, we've seen that already. There's a lot of interest in this project. If things could be broken down to volunteer work, we've seen that in Meadowlark Field, for instance, the replantings there. We've seen volunteer cleanup days on Calder Creek that Joan and Jeffrey did. But I don't know, how do we plan volunteer work? I mean, somebody's got to.
Well, there's a need for
Right.
coordination and sometimes for a little bit of funding to help make that happen. The trash cleanup, the Laguna Foundation took the lead on organizing that at no cost to the city, and that was great, but there's a limit to how much of that kind of activity can be organized. And you do need coordination by somebody, city staff or consultants or nonprofits. But certainly that could be, for example, a possible funding. A modest amount of money might leverage a lot of volunteer work if we have some good volunteer outreach and coordination and planning.
Any other questions? You have more?
I'm thinking that perhaps, once this plan is adopted, we could get together, we could have a meeting with our friends at the Laguna Foundation and talk about how we could best work with the Laguna Foundation to utilize their volunteer management services. And then perhaps another thing we could think about is, I don't know if you all have been looking at Coastal Conservancy
Yes.
grants, but the Conservancy is really directed towards watershed restoration, and unfortunately, no longer trails, for my opinion. But they have a huge amount of money for watershed restoration, and it seems like a collaborative effort is the kind of thing that they like to see. And maybe we can put a mix together that's volunteer management, city partnership, nonprofit, and start getting on the
Okay, let's see, we haven't opened this to the public yet, but I'm wondering, are there other questions of staff or our consultant team? Before we take comments from the public, does anyone? Yeah, okay, because then we'll bring it back for discussion to questions.
Okay. First of all, I was really pleased to see a lot of the changes and edits made in the plan. I think they addressed a lot of the concerns that were brought up, so thank you for that. I stupidly didn't think to provide you with a copy of it, but I prepared a list of some goals that I think most of them are met. You don't have a copy of it.
Actually did.
Oh, she did, okay, so you got it, okay, well, thanks for covering my back, Mary. But anyway, I think many of these are covered, but there's a few that I think we should look at seriously. I just having been a member of the volunteer crew that went out there to remove blackberries and seeing how nightmarish it was, I actually asked a couple of people in the landscape maintenance business, if you had to remove large quantities of blackberries and you couldn't use herbicides to kill them all, how would you do it? And both of them responded with a backhoe. And so I said, well, what if you had to rely on, volunteer labor? And they said, well, then I'd find a volunteer to drive a backhoe.
Well, can I interject? That is an option that we lay out in the plan. Yeah, that's
So-
one of the methods we described for blackberry removal. We were talking about careful extraction from among native willows. But yes, for large swaths of nothing but blackberries, we describe in there use of equipment. for that.
Okay, well, yeah, so that's where I was going with that, is like, it seems like you're still gonna wind up damaging some of the existing natives, but you're anticipating their regrowth or reestablishment after the area's been denuded?
Certainly, any blackberry removal on the preserve would be accompanied by not only replanting with native vegetation, but significant heavy replanting of native understory to compete, and as Joan mentioned, fill that niche that would be left by the blackberry. There's going to be a lot of soil disturbance. There would need to be a lot of erosion control, protection, and vegetative replanting, and that's, again, all laid out in the plan.
Okay, great. But again, I really wanted to say thanks. I really appreciate a lot of changes made, and if we could like capture the last few of these things, some of which are already in there, I think we're in good shape. Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think, I'm just checking for understanding, I think some of these are from the workup that Lynn Dealer gave us with the 24.
It's a synopsis of some,
Yeah.
and it deletes
Right.
some of them as well.
Yeah, I know, because he had 24, and I went through those in preparation for today, because it's important to me that I do that. And I noted 10 of them are addressed in the report successfully, and others are kind of grouped. Lynn's suggestion might be about specific furniture, like using the 300-year-old tree as a seat. There is mention in the plan of amenities to provide rest stops in places for people, so it's really, I think a lot of it is covered well, just because those were good suggestions. I wanted to make sure many of them were in play in the report, and I
So I
don't,
basically just tried to synthesize it down to a small group.
so what are you suggesting we do with this tonight? I'm not sure. Is
Well,
what you want added for the goals, and the
Well,
goal numbers match? the
I
report?
think for instance, unless I missed it in here, is there a section of this plan that deals with the blackberries that are on the county's property on the south side of the Redota Trail, just as you enter the railroad forest?
Well, right, since that's not part of the preserve, it's not specifically shown on maps as a place to call out. But we did add, in this last round, we added the recommendation that the entries, I'm not sure if you're
Yeah.
talking about all along the south side or just at the entrance? Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I
we
noticed
added.
where it said beautify the entrances and work with county parks as
Yeah.
necessary.
Yes, as you can see in the green highlighting, you'll see there's a new addition that says to enhance the entry points to the trail, and in particular, that one at the west end of the Joe Rodota Trail, and working with parks on that.
Yeah, so, see, that would conceivably cover goal one, unless we want to specifically state, for instance, the crowded trees that are there right now that are growing up instead of out. I don't know if we want to get into that level of specificity.
Personally, I don't, because I'm not qualified like the consultant people are. I think if we have an overarching goal that covers it, we're good. And I'm not sure we all agree that those trees are crowded or growing wrong. I don't know, because I'm not an expert in pruning trees or taking trees out.
Maybe like the city's arborist could take a look at it, for instance.
Yeah, if we ever get this plan, on the ground and underway.
Is, goal 6 here says protect railroad forest trail from silt inundation due to overflow of Calder Creek. Is that addressed in the plan? Did I miss that part?
No, we didn't specifically talk about that. It's a part of an ongoing maintenance that the city does after major storms. yeah, there is sediment and silt that is often deposited on the trail. That's part of the natural process in this, and part of this setting is this low gradient stream that's at its confluence, or almost at its confluence with the Laguna. So it's an expected process, given the setting. We did talk to Public Works about their maintenance work. They didn't identify that as problematic from their perspective. So we just assumed that would continue as needed, that they would remove any sediment deposits from the trail after major storms. I don't see it as an ecological concern because of the setting. That's what we would expect to see. Does that answer your question?
Well, it was just, I guess, it's been recommended that a man-made feature be created there to accommodate that runoff, to prevent the silt, to avoid the silt buildup on the trail. And I'm just wondering is that something worth considering?
That's an idea of building a pond,
Right.
digging
Yeah.
out a pond.
Right, we've addressed that before, but that's not something we recommend, but if you were to create ponds there alongside the trail, it would obviously be a major design and engineering undertaking and permitting undertaking.
You can't just go
And-
in with your backhoe.
No.
Well, you could get the blackbird.
And the silt that's being moved around would just be deposited into the pond that you just created. And so then you would just need to remove the silt from the pond.
Right.
So, and I know that similar things have been tried elsewhere on the preserve in the past, like that little overlook area on Morris Street. I don't know if you're familiar with it, this little boardwalk that juts out from the sidewalk, and there's a little nature trail sign, and everybody's like, what's this for? Well, that was supposed to be an open water habitat, designed early on in the Laguna Preserve establishment, and it just filled up. And
Right.
that's what would occur, I would imagine, with the pond that would be created. So we didn't see benefit to that, so we did review that and discuss it, but we don't recommend it.
Okay, and following on the Vice Mayor's question about the shape of the Calder Creek, banks, the city has a Ives Park master plan to naturalize part of Calder Creek through Ives Park, and maybe this is a question for the planning director, but are we gonna have to go through all the same permitting issues if we were going to do this in the Laguna, or is that thoroughly within our jurisdiction?
Now, there will be permitting for the work in Ives Park, for sure, yes.
Because it's a waterway.
Right. So I guess what I'm getting at is, it just seems odd to me that the city is spending a lot of money to naturalize Calder Creek, and then 500 yards away, or whatever the distance is on the other side of Finland Avenue, we're saying, don't naturalize it, leave it as is.
Well, I think it's partly related to the character of the two areas that in Ives Park. I mean, there's a concrete channel, fenced in with virtually no natural vegetation at all in the park area. And in contrast, in the preserve, while it perhaps Calder Creek was channelized in the past, there's really, natural vegetation has grown up, and there's not these concrete channels that you see in Ives Park, or the chain link fencing surrounding it. It feels different, it looks different. I don't know if our consultants have comments on the natural character that's developed on that portion of the creek. Pretty different.
Okay. So, in answering your question, what should we do with these tonight? I mean, I guess and again, I've tried to make these as general as possible, with a few exceptions, like under number 1. If the council is in agreement that, and you know, I mean, like maybe goal number 6, okay, maybe that's not feasible because we just moved the problem from one area to another. But, you know, if the council supports these goals, then I guess what I would say, what I'd like to see happen tonight is to ask that they be compared against all the latest iteration of this plan and ensure that they're included in some manner and as a concept, and then move forward, and once we see that final edit, approve the plan.
So I just want to ask again, when you say goal number 1, does that match a number 1 in the book? Or
No, this is just my
independent?
own numbering system.
Okay, because I'm anticipating we could run through these 9 points right now and know whether or not they're in the plan, and I think most of them are. Or they're not feasible according to your recommendation.
Forgive me, I received this list this evening, and I think
Yeah.
Joan hasn't had it for too much longer, but I think we have, as you've been meeting over other topics, reviewed them and thought about how they are or are not addressed in the existing draft. And I think, as we just did with number 6, we can, if you wish, proceed pretty quickly to your satisfaction to move forward, not on maybe a revised draft, but on the current draft you have in front of you.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't
let's
think
look
there's
at
a
it.
lot of work involved.
No, I think we can do it in probably the next 5 minutes. So goal number 1, beautify the Rodata trailhead at Petaluma Avenue. That's already in there. I don't recommend us being as specific as this is. I'm going with the specifics in the plan. Beautify Road Forest Trailhead by Sebastopol Inn.
Well, we have,
Where is the
we
trailhead there?
recommended that the entrances to the preserve be beautified. This particular entrance is outside of the preserve, so it's beyond the specific scope of the plan.
Okay, beautify Calder Creek viewing area at Redwood Forest Trail Bridge.
Yeah, we've recommended that be the place where restoration start, Kinley and Blackberry be removed, bench be added, and simple signage on the bridge be provided welcoming people to the preserve.
Okay, number 4, provide seating, rest amenities, benches or tables for area users.
Yes,
Throughout the plan.
yes, and
Mhm.
along Calder Creek as well as along AmeriCorps.
Okay, goal number 5, naturalize banks of initial stretch of Calder Creek. And so I'm a little confused by that because the creek isn't really, I mean, if it's messed with, it's messed with historically and it's been left there naturalizing for all the years that I've lived here. So I don't know what that naturalizing means beyond what it's doing now.
Right, I think maybe Mr. Eater is referring to where the creek comes out of the culvert? Is that what you mean by the initial?
Yeah, in
initial
other words,
stretch?
it looks like it's been modified by humans to be more of a ditch than a natural creek. So it has pretty steep vertical sidewalls, and just the idea of, you know, making it more, I guess, the more gentle transition on the banks.
Part of the difficulty there is because of the narrowness of the preserve. We've got the asphalt trail and then the post office annex property, and there's a kind of a skinny little strip there of land that is potential earth for the creek to be in. But, you know,
It
otherwise.
just looks pretty,
valuable.
anyway.
I think that is the most messed with place right there, because it's coming out of the ditch. So maybe that's one that would be,
Well, it's just the idea to look at the possibility of doing that.
Well, we did include that in terms of minor handwork, we're recommending restoration along those banks, removing Himalayan blackberry and replanting with diverse native species. And in the process, it's not a very tall bank for very long. If you look, it pretty rapidly turns into a pretty natural creek channel, by the time by the time it's at the bridge and just beyond. It's a shifting channel, it's not a very big drop from the ground level to the water level. And so, minor work there to gently reshape would be one thing. We did not recommend a major reconstruction there of the creek channel. would again be a major design, engineering, and permitting undertaking that we didn't see an ecological or recreation benefit to.
Okay,
Okay, so I think we handled that one. Goal 6, we've already talked about. 7, it says acknowledge and preserve / display items from past history / usage of areas. So that's, I think, the more recent histories, cultural resources, community resources that we keep rather than hide or trash, like the railroad tracks or the hunk of concrete for whatever that is. I don't know how that got there, those kinds of things. Do you have a comment on that one, number 7?
I think, again, it's pretty well addressed in the plan, both that we acknowledge the history of the preserve throughout, and opportunities for interpretive signage, and that existing features such as the railroad tracks would be exposed via restoration and available for, as we put it previously, like casual exploration throughout the preserve. I'm not sure to the extent that Councilmember Eder was asking for sort of additional, I'm trying to look back to your actual, to display items, like, I'm not sure, because the suggestion of placing railroad cars on the preserve has come up in the past, and to what degree you wanted to see that included in the plan isn't clear from these comments. So we have, to the degree that I've described, accommodated that.
Okay, can we go to goal 8? Shield man-made development from view to the maximum extent possible with native plantings. That might be the view of Gravenstein Inn or something.
well, as an example, if we were successful in removal of the blackberries on the south side of the trail at the Petaluma Avenue trailhead, there's, I think, like a body shop right there with, industrial infrastructure. So if you remove those blackberries, because it seemed like they would just tend to migrate back across the trail and repopulate areas that were been removed, you would solve one problem by getting rid of the blackberries, but you create another problem by exposing a lot full of damaged cars. So, the idea was like, how can we shield those areas? Or like the back of the post office annex and the welding building and those kinds of things,
Right, well, again, remember, all of our recommendations to remove blackberry and other invasives are only in conjunction with replanting of natives, where it would really go hand in hand.
Okay.
So the species could be selected, will be selected that are appropriate for the site. And I think, the diverse suite of species that we're talking about, ranging from little stuff next to the creek, sedges and ferns and so on, to shrubs, to overstory canopy trees, will help provide that more filtered view that I think you're looking for.
Yeah, visual filter.
Okay, goal number 9, assign appropriate names to preserve areas as needed or appropriate.
Well, we've heard from the community about honoring, the Pomo heritage. And I think, I'm not advocating naming all the areas Pomo names. I think we need a diverse selection of names that really honor all the people who have participated in Sebastopol's past. And so I just wanted to make sure that was captured, that's part of the plan, is to develop the names. Did we, I'm getting tired.
I know, we have 2
But
more items to do.
did we address goal number 2 about the trailhead entry point by the Sebastopol Inn?
Yeah, we checked that one
I
off.
just missed it.
So
Okay.
about the names, is that in the plan? You've
Yeah.
commented? Yeah. Okay,
I think
Okay.
we already have some people that are working on.
and I think Kenyon's meeting with the tribe to, because you don't just use those names, you need to get permission.
Yeah, so Canyon's already
Right.
done that.
Okay.
Right,
So, again, the whole
That's
point
reassuring.
here was to try to incorporate these concepts, if feasible, into the plan, in the final
and
edit.
it's really helpful to have it in writing and organized, because then we can follow what you're saying. So I think it was good to be reassured those issues are recognized in the plan.
That's all I have for now.
Okay, that was really helpful. So are there other comments? Councilmember Slater?
Very rapidly, I've had yet another conversation with Joe DiTomaso, PhD of the UC Davis and he was the immediate past president of the Weed Science Society of America. He's the president of the California Invasive Plant Council. I'm sure his name is familiar to you. And I've learned way more about Himalaya blackberries than you could possibly imagine. Since the last time even. And I'm pleased to see the edit about the limited possible use of herbicides in the area. I did not receive a whole lot of good news from him about hand removal. It seems problematic in a lot of ways for an infestation of this size. So we don't need to well, pardon my horrible pun, get down in the weeds about this right now. But once this work begins, I'd be interested to, and this doesn't need to be an item, you can just come to me via staff, about methods and procedures on the infestation removal work beginning. Because I think that to tap into that knowledge would be very helpful in actually getting some results that are real, that last, which is what we're after. So I'm comfortable with the contents of the plan. At this point, I think that we have talked about it at some length, and I'm sure that the mayor and vice mayor are ready to, or would like to weigh in as well. But I will move that we adopt the Laguna Preserve Master Plan in its current form.
Thank you.
Public comment?
We did.
We did? Boy, we never called public comment. We have people
We didn't?
here waiting to, we didn't?
Well, let's hold off on that motion.
Okay, pause the motion, sorry.
I apologize too, because I know some of you we've seen at the podium. So what people want to comment?
I would be delighted to.
Well, thank you so much, because you waited till this late hour.
You know, my name is Eric Wyckoff, and I've been writing Sebastopol on my return address for about 23 years now, I think. I've lived in a couple different parts of town and out in the country where I am now. I'm here primarily tonight just to say that I'm not an expert in Himalayan blackberries, but I have learned a good deal about them. I've spent several hours, which is not a lot, considering the wealth of knowledge that's out there on it. But I did just want to throw that out there. One of the areas of concern I have is this document being used as a codified version of our vision moving forward to the future. And I was thinking of Mr. Jacobs from a couple of weeks ago, and how if somebody talked about medical marijuana 20 years ago, how different impressions would have been. There was a couple of words that in the plan that I'm not sure if they're in the current one, but very specifically just to kind of parse out one in particular. There was a quote, it was in Appendix 7B, it just said, the use of herbicides of American blackberry is not recommended in the plan based on viable alternatives. I've done a good deal of reading, and I concur with you that there don't seem to be a lot of viable alternatives to the use of some limited use of herbicides. There's talk of goats, there's talks of burning, there's talks of removal by hand, which they said would range anywhere from 300 to 1,000 hours of labor per acre to do. And I'm thinking about the people on the cleanups that I've participated in and the relatively small number of them that would be willing to work for 6 hours on their hands and knees, digging things out. It doesn't seem very practical to me. It does talk very positively about the use of mechanization, how it's characterized as efficient. And by the way, on this I'm referring to a report I'm sure most of you have probably read from the Nature Conservancy, which was kind of a large meta-analysis, literary review of the work of about 20 different people. It's widely regarded as a thing. So I just wanted to encourage the council to not lock yourself in on not using herbicide, possibly in the future, because as Council Member Eder talked about last week, I don't think you would find a chain people who would be willing to work out there for hours and hours and hours digging it out. And it reminds me of, I also want to compliment the community in general. We were looking at areas, remember, that used to be a garbage dump and literally a bilge pollution site for industrial and railroad Forest now was certainly a very heavy industrialized area, sprayed down with all kinds of nasty creosote chemicals, I'm sure. So we've done an awesome job so far. I would like to live to see Calder Creek just to see it from the bike trail that I'm on so often. So anyway, thank you so much, and my hat's off to all of you for the work that you do here. Again, a week after we late in the evening, certainly. Thank you.
Well, thank you for staying late with us. How about other folks who have been this long? Lynn, back? Anyone want to speak? Again, I apologize for skipping over that. It's just because it's late.
Yeah, Sebastopol could be one of the most beautiful trails, or the Joe Rodota Trail could be one of the most beautiful trails in the county. It starts out on one of the most beautiful trails of the county, but the Sebastopol end of it is just sort of drab and weedy and crowded and not feeling safe. And I wish that it was the overall goal in here to make our Sebastopol end of that trail beautiful. A couple things that could be done, and one is to naturalize Calder Creek. It is, this is a restoration document, and that creek is so altered, and it has the same cross-section as the creek in Ives Park. But if you go down a few hundred yards past the bridge, you see what the natural creek looks like. And it's entirely different. And it's got soft shoulders, and it's approachable, and you walk down and walk with your feet in the water instead of just drop off that 2-foot cliff that's along there. And I think that is a really important thing to be in there. There's a lot of reasons why not. Well, one, the permit is free. It can be filled out by a layman. It is overseen by the Department of Army Corps of Engineers. It's called a Title 27 permit, and they encourage it, and they make it really easy to get that permit. There are a lot of small pieces of machinery, little backhoes, that can get in there and do that job with no problem. There's a lot of room for that. And it is one of the most highly viewed areas. The most people you see anywhere walking in town is in between the Petaluma Avenue and where the Railroad Forest Trail is. And it is part of the scenery there, and it is only 40, 60 feet away, and it is the right place to make it really beautiful. It's right at the entrance of our town. Second thing that really should be done is to remove the walls of mixes of blackberries and willows that are several hundred yards long. It just create this compressed feeling along the trail, unsafe feeling that I've heard many ladies say, because people can kind of hide in the bush. But by clearing that back, you could create beautiful views into the railroad forest, and there are beautiful views, and it could be part of just this lovely landscape that is Sebastopol's entry to the Laguna. And so I hope you'll include those two goals in this adoption.
Thank you, Lynn. And Judith, welcome back.
Hi, thank you. I just want to encourage taking up Citizen Lynn's suggestions for beauty, and the tenets of not paving is better than paving, and curves are better than straight. I also wondered about the sum of $50,000 being spoken of as a study, and I wondered, what is the average consultant's fees hourly rate, roughly?
We're not answering questions here.
Oh.
I mean, I can hold that and see if staff has an answer at the end of public comment.
Okay, so I would just float out there with knowing very little about it, maybe 150 an hour, more or less, I don't know. I'm not intimately familiar with it, but I would like to suggest that, as As a country, we've begun to look at the disparate grades of the bottom and the top. And I would like to suggest that thinking about having volunteers and marshaled efforts for the actual work that goes into making these places versus paying somebody a sum of the usual magnitude that a consultant earns is not something that we would wish to be doing. So if you wish to ask for volunteers, why don't you ask for some consultant volunteers and see if you can get some coming forth there, because they've certainly earned fine amounts in the past and no doubt will in the future. And perhaps that amount could be more equitably spread amongst the populace, some of whom need it a great deal. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other folks from our public want to speak? Have we captured everything? You guys have stayed through this whole meeting. I just want to make sure we hear from you if you need to speak. It sounds, looks like we're good. We've got everything.
He's just a nut that stays here till 11.
I appreciate people who do that. So let's see, I'm going to bring this back to the council. Can we hear your motion again? Now would be the time. And then we'll have discussion if we need.
I move that the council approves the Laguna Preserve plan, restoration plan.
Restoration and management.
Restoration and management.
Okay, and there was a second. It was me. All right, I'll second that again. Any other comments or discussion, Councilmember Reed? And then,
Well, you know, I support the motion. I really wish that we would include some verbiage that said, investigate the possibility of naturalizing Calder Creek as feasible. I mean, we have a lot of these, if possible, as feasible. You know what I'm saying? They're not commitments to do something. They just, you know, yeah, exactly that. Investigate the possibility of naturalizing Calder Creek, and with, you know, with the understanding the permitting and engineering and cost aspects of doing so. I think the second item that Mr. Dietler brought up will be addressed by the removal of the blackberries, and yeah, I don't know how that's going to turn out, but I think a lot of this feeling of lack of safety that's currently experienced by a lot of people will be resolved by large areas of blackberry mower. So that would be the only, you know, I would support this, but I would like to see that put in there, just to leave that door open. It may never happen. It could be a great idea and very feasible, but we couldn't afford it, or the powers that be may say, forget it. So I'd just like to leave that open.
okay, any other discussion? Vice Mayor Glass.
I just wanted to make the comment that I think this is a really good plan, and thank you for working on it and so diligently. And thank you to the public for all their input in making it an even better plan. And I want to also say that we have, I think I said this a couple of meetings ago, we have spent a lot of money on people who have advanced degrees in figuring this stuff out. And you have given us the benefit of your expertise to come up with a plan that works for the environment and works for restoration and so many other aspects. And so thank you for that, and I think we should adopt this plan. But the other thing I want to say is that this is not a work plan. This is a restoration and management plan. And the idea behind, as I see it, behind a restoration and management plan is to give you the guidelines and the broad vision for restoring an area and an ecosystem, or part of an ecosystem. And that's what we're paying for. We're paying for guidelines and the vision And then we'll go through and take those guidelines to create specific work plans at specific times to get the specific thing, to get generalized goals done. And so I think a lot of the detailed issues that people may have about this really belong in a work plan as opposed to being in the vision of what is a restoration and management plan. That provides us guidelines with how to put those details together. So that's my thought.
Councilmember Slater, any last comments?
No, thank you.
Okay, I have one, but you go ahead. Can you-
We're just gonna ask if there's any support for making that one small minor amendment to the motion, that we include language to investigate that possibility in the plan.
I'm not seeing an interest.
Well, I believe that it's, may not be that specific, but I believe that it's generally in there.
I believe it recommends against it.
Is there any support for putting that in the motion, not from the maker of the motion? So, let's see if this fails or passes with or without it. We're gonna start without that comment, and the consultant team, I think, addressed that when we went through all the 9 points. I just wanna say I appreciate your thoroughness in, relating to the council and the public with all our questions and comments and concerns. You have great endurance and great professional skill. I also appreciate the sort of tempered response that we've received, and I see that as part of your education and professionalism. You know, while we up here may go, woohoo, let's do this, we get the real feedback from you, and that's been of great value to me especially, because I'm putting trails where they don't go, I'm putting kayak launch spots maybe where they don't go, and I think you've helped me be more realistic and responsible to the environment in your comments and your return draft, so I appreciate all your work. If you'll pass it on to the whole team too. All right, so any more comments? Then I'll ask for the vote on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That's a 3-1 vote, and the motion will carry. Thank you. At 11:30, I say thank you. So we need to move on quickly to assignments. I was thinking this wouldn't take a long time, and we could, pardon me. Is there something more we need to do on that one?
Staff was having a brief discussion about the assignment items, and if the council wishes to do so, we think with the exception of one of the assignment items, the council could take up this item after the interviews on Monday, January 11th. We could add it to that agenda, complete the assignments that evening in the view of the late hour.
That's a good idea, but there's one thing we have to deal with tonight, did you say in the
Yes.
sentence? What is that?
There's a mosquito abatement meeting
There's
tomorrow,
a mosquito
correct?
abatement.
So we need to reappoint
Oh,
Vice Mayor Morales. I mean, that's the one that we need to do.
okay, and the rest we can talk about after the interviews. Monday.
If we change it, it'd be by resolution, so there's no, yeah, nothing more.
Okay. So we'll check with you. Do you wish to be reappointed to that assignment, Lucy?
Yes, I just started
Get
figuring
it,
out all
uh-huh.
these different parts of vector controls.
Okay.
Now I finally got some.
Good, so could we have a motion to that effect to have Vice Mayor Glass continue in that assignment?
So moved.
Okay, I'll second that. Sorry, any public comment before we vote on the motion? See no one come forward. I think we'll move to the vote on that motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions? You're on it. The meeting's tomorrow. Thank you, we handled that one. Okay. So we have a calendar that Mary has prepared for us. This is the 2016, looking at the year at a glance with all our meetings. I just want to point out very quickly, in January, we have 4 meetings, February 4 meetings, March 3 meetings, April 3 meetings, when our regular meetings are 2 a month for the whole council. In maybe May or June or July, we may have additional meetings, special meetings set for the budget or labor negotiations, or the general plan may have extra meetings that roll on. So it's quite a heavy work year. I thought it was important, and Mary helped by preparing this calendar, that we all kind of anticipate a lot of work ahead and be ready to have the stamina for those additional meetings. I think in light of that, I'm wondering if there's some discussion or some report from our city manager or city clerk in addition to what I've said about the calendar. Either of you guys want to report from your staff report?
No, I believe that you said a lot. There's a lot of meetings that aren't on here yet.
Right.
That have a possibility of being on them. So we just wanted to give you an overall view of the upcoming year.
Right. And so I can say, this is a year with a lot of meetings, and in this case, a meeting that's gone longer than almost anything we've ever done yet. My thought is to ask if the council is interested in canceling a meeting, say, as we did for last year, 2015, the later meeting in August, anticipating that we may be able to manage our workflow so that we don't need that meeting, and then staff would have the opportunity, as last year, to catch up with the volume that's accumulated, plan vacations, that sort of thing. And this is my question to the council. I haven't heard this from staff at all, but it seemed like a good idea last year, so I want to check in with you. Is that something we need to do tonight or wait on?
You can do it tonight, or you can
Yeah.
wait on it. I mean, it's kind
Okay.
of hard to tell.
It's hard to tell this early.
And especially with elections this year.
Okay, so we're looking now to approve the setting of this calendar for the 2016 meeting dates. Do we need a motion to do that?
Yeah.
We don't need a motion to do that. Nobody's concerned about canceling August this early in the year.
No, I think that's what we did last year, was work towards it.
I think we work towards that, because we all need a break too. And August is a good time, I think, for staff. That's the preference.
So council's consensus is to work at canceling the second meeting in August.
To work with it in mind, or do our work forward with it in mind that we could prepare to cancel the second meeting in August. Okay? Let's see, city manager, city attorney, city clerk reports.
The city clerk and myself would like to take another minute of your time this evening, apologize for that, and reminder that we are hosting the mayor and council members dinner meeting on February 11th. We have been attempting to locate an appropriate venue to hold the meeting, and also to provide the dinner at a cost that's in the range that the other cities' staff and council members expect, something in the $30 to $50 range. We found that to be somewhat challenging. So the city clerk has an update for us on where we stand on that. The reason I think we can give direction tonight is this is primarily a scheduling issue. It's not an action item per se. We're just trying to get some council consensus on where we should hold the mayors and council members meeting, because they have to send that notice out like in the next couple of days.
And so is the meeting date the 4th or the 11th?
11.
And that's actually a date that's a holiday for our city.
It's a holiday.
Does that get us out of it?
Sorry, we're on holiday. I think
What
so.
a bummer.
They
Oh,
will all be working.
okay. What's our status, Mary? This is,
Okay, so I called around to a few different places, so let me just run down the ones that I did. So I contacted Spirit Works. They cannot accommodate a group of our size for a sit-down dinner. They would only be able to do tours of the facility for a group that large. Weishman Hall, if we wanted to cater, that was unavailable, that's already been rented out. I checked with the Zazu, their price range was $59 to $69 for a dinner that does not include tax, gratuity, any beverage,
No.
nothing. And their tables would have to be one long banquet that goes around the area, so that was that. Gypsy Cafe, they could do it, they would do it at $40 per person. include tax gratuity, there may be a parkage charge.
I did it before.
K&L Bistro has not responded to me. Hot Mug, the